Hi, my name's Matt Dolan and welcome to this talk on certificate pinning. A lot has happened since I first wrote an article about certificate pinning in 2017, not least Google's updated guidance to avoid pinning. While it may seem strange to start the talk by saying don't use pinning, it's important to highlight what you need to consider if you choose to ignore this advice. Let's start by discussing the problem pinning tries to solve by asking ourselves, how secure is a secure connection? HTTPS does a pretty good job, however there's one thing we need to be aware of when a connection is established. The first thing that happens when establishing a secure connection is the client sends a hello message along with a list of supported encryption ciphers. The server replies with its hello message picking a cipher and presents the client with its certificate. The certificate identifies the server as the one you've connected, and it's up to the client to verify that the certificate is valid. The client then builds a certificate chain using the leaf certificate retrieved from the handshake as a starting point. The issue a distinguished name from each certificate is used to find its parent certificate until we find a root certificate which is installed on the client's device. The public keys contained are used to verify the signature of these certificates, building a trusted certificate chain. The idea that a root certificate is installed in the client first originated in the Netscape web browser in the 1990s. This decision by Netscape means we implicitly trust the root certificate, and that means we trust the certificate authorities who generate and sign these root certificates to only issue certificates to people who own a given domain. Now, given these two certificate authorities, which do you trust? Both have the word trust in their logos, so surely we trust both of them. Unfortunately, both were hacked in 2011. With DigiNotar, this resulted in a rogue Google.com certificate in circulation for more than 5 weeks. And for those 5 weeks, the person who created those certificates could pretend to be Google and gain access to their encrypted network traffic. While there is nothing inherently insecure about HTTPS, the system is built on the trust of those root certificates, which is why standards such as certificate pinning gained popularity. So how does certificate pinning stop this kind of attack? The simplified version is that pinning uses a hash of the public key to verify that a particular certificate appears somewhere in the chain, and if it doesn't, then the connection is denied. From a technical perspective, implementing pinning looks pretty trivial, requiring just a few lines of code. However, the code doesn't really show us the complete picture. Firstly, we need to ask ourselves the question, which certificate should we pin against in the chain? By pinning against your leaf certificate, you are guaranteeing with close to 100% certainty that this is your certificate and thus the chain is valid. Leaf certificates tend to have a short expiry time, and if, for instance, the SSL certificates are reissued because the private key is compromised, your app will be bricked until you can push an update out. Of course, the same may also be true if you frequently cycle your certificates. By pinning against the intermediate certificate, you are trusting that intermediate certificate authority to not misissue the certificate for your servers. This also has the advantage that as long as you stick to the same certificate provider, then any changes to your leaf certificate will work without having to update your app. By pinning against the root certificate, you are trusting the root certificate authority as well as any intermediaries they trust not to misissue certificates. Often the root and intermediate authorities are the same company, in which case there's not much difference in the number of people you are trusting. However, that's not always the case. Your choice of certificate impacts the level of security you achieve, decreasing as you reach the root certificate, so it's important for you to choose carefully. It's important to note you don't have to pin against just one certificate in a chain. Indeed, the general recommendation is to pin against multiple levels to decrease the chances of bricking your app at the expense of trusting more certificate issuers. In my mind, it would seem prudent to pin at the intermediate and leaf levels to give a sensible balance. If the pins stored in your app don't match those returned by the HTTPS connection, how do you inform your users? You can fail hard and stop the app from establishing the connection. This is the most secure and easiest to implement, but introduces the chance of self-induced denial of service and user experience issues when connections cannot be established. The alternative is to fail soft and let the app establish a connection without pinning. This is complex to get right, but one possibility is to limit app functionality in this use case. My personal preference is towards failing hard. Whichever you choose though, ensure you log the compromise to your backend to keep yourself aware of it. If your private key were to ever get into the wrong hands, you would need to set up certificates with a new key pretty quickly. This is why you are recommended to have backup SSL certificates ahead of time so you can quickly switch out the old at a moment's notice. We are checking the certificate chain to see if it contains at least one of a set of keys. After all, this is how pinning against, say, both the leaf and root certificates would work. You only need one of those pins to match. This also means you can store pins for any backup certificates ahead of time, so when disaster strikes, your app will already continue to work with no new app release. However, it will also continue to accept connections to servers using the compromised private key, with the only fix being to release a new app update. Some people prefer not including the new key, as a broken app forces users to upgrade quicker. With time, the pins your app needs to validate the certificate chain will change, so your storage of these pins can have a big impact on the maintenance of your app. There are a few options when it comes to this, each with their own caveats. Storing the pins hard-coded as part of the app is by far the easiest to implement. It can also be one of the more complex to maintain, as a change in server certificates can mean you need to force your clients to upgrade your app. The app can, on first execution, determine the public key by making a call to the server and storing this for all future executions. This can help when your certificates rotate frequently, however leaves the app open to key tainting on initialization and pin expiration. If you don't know your endpoints ahead of time though, this can be a good option. However, you still need to carefully manage pin failures. For maximum flexibility, creating a pin server that returns the current set of valid pins is a great option. You still need to pin the pin server, but then it's incredibly easy to manage the pin stored and update this when disaster strikes. Generally, it is best to store the pins out of band embedded as part of the app. If you're concerned with data leakage when your app is decompiled or reverse engineered, then obfuscating the keys is not too hard to do using tools like ProGuard and DexGuard. Obfuscation may be especially important if you store a backup key that is not currently in use to help hide it from prying eyes. Hopefully this has helped highlight some of the reasons why getting pinning correct is so hard. It's no surprise that Google changed their advice, given Chrome deprecated support for pinning in July 2018. And while no modern web browser supports pinning anymore, it still remains popular on mobile because little is known about its replacement. That replacement is certificate transparency. For more details about certificate transparency, check out the project on GitHub.